The material contained in this training program is based on the information obtained from the current national, international, and company regulations, and it is to be used for training purposes only. At the time of designing, this program contained then current information. In the event of conflict between data provided herein and that in publication issued by the authority shall take precedence. Auto-flight, Flight Management System Descent Phase. In this lesson, FMS descent phase will be discussed. Here is the outline. Introduction. Managed descent. Constraint management. Selected descent. Early descent. Late descent. Expedite descent. Introduction. The FMS automatically switches from cruise phase to descent phase when reaching top of descent, as computed in flight plan, or an early descent is initiated by selecting a lower altitude on the FCU at a distance less than 200 nautical miles to the destination, or altitude selected on the FCU is at or below the higher of flight level 200, or the highest destination altitude constraint. The FMA vertical mode displays descent if managed mode is engaged. Open descent or vertical speed is indicated if selected mode is engaged. The first column normally shows thrust idle. Mach is displayed in case of an early descent or when the FMS does not immediately command idle thrust. The FMS constructs the descent path backwards, beginning from a position 1,000 feet on the final approach with speed at V approach. It then computes the top of descent by taking into account any descent speed and altitude constraints, and assuming that managed speed is used. The initial segment of the descent is the idle segment, until the first altitude constraint is reached. Subsequent segments are the geometric paths, which are typically shallower and non-idle descent paths. The idle segment is computed to maintain the managed speed with idle thrust plus a small amount of thrust. This extra thrust provides some flexibility to keep the aircraft on the descent path if engine anti-ice is used, or if winds vary. When a cabin rate has been selected during cruise, a repressurization segment is included. You can perform a descent by either the managed descent mode or the selected descent modes. Both modes can be flown either with selected speed or managed speed. Managed descent initiation and monitoring. The descent should be initiated at the top of descent. On the navigation display, the top of descent is displayed by the white arrow. It is not shown if heading or track mode are engaged. On the MCDU flight plan page, the top of descent is shown as pseudo waypoint. The progress page provides the time at and distance to the top of descent. After receiving the ATC clearance, reset the FCU altitude. When you reach the top of descent point, push the FCU altitude selector knob. In situations of high cruise Mach number or strong upper-level winds, it is recommended to push the altitude selector a few miles prior to the top of descent to avoid overshooting the computed descent path. The FMA initially displays Mach, followed by thrust idle. Thrust reduces to idle if no repressurization segment is computed. The FMA vertical mode displays descent if managed mode is engaged. Note that managed descent mode is only available with the navigation mode engaged. The progress and performance pages change from cruise to descent. The descent mode guides the aircraft along the FMS pre-computed descent profile by taking into account all altitude and speed constraints. Managed speed is the recommended descent speed mode, and it provides the most economical descent. However, as the actual conditions may differ from those planned, the descent mode operates within 20 knots speed range around the managed target speed to maintain the descent path. When descent mode is used, the descent is mainly monitored using the vertical deviation symbol, called yo-yo. displayed on the primary flight display, and its digital value on the progress page. These indications show whether the aircraft is on, above, or below the descent profile. Note that in some versions, the vertical deviation symbol is displayed with a magenta circle. On the primary flight display, the range of vertical deviation indication is plus or minus 500 feet. If the deviation is greater than 500 feet, symbol stays at the upper or lower range limit. The exact value is displayed in the progress page. Position of off-level indicated by a blue arrow on the navigation display provides another means of descent monitoring. The aircraft is considered to be on the vertical profile when it is within 50 feet of it. Have a look at this display. What is the position of the aircraft with respect to the descent path? If the aircraft is above the descent path, vertical deviation is down on the primary flight display and positive on the progress page. The autopilot will increase the speed towards the upper limit of the speed range to keep the aircraft on the path with idle thrust. If the speed reaches the upper limit, the aircraft maintains the upper limit speed. Thus, the vertical deviation will slowly increase. If the aircraft is below the descent path, vertical deviation is up on the primary flight display and negative on the progress page. The speed will decrease towards the lower limit of the speed range with idle thrust. When the lower speed limit is reached, the auto thrust will apply a thrust to intercept the descent path at this lower speed. Manage descent with selected speed. Once the FMS switches to descent phase, the managed speed cannot be modified. If a specific speed is required after the descent has been engaged, set the speed on the FCU and pull the speed selector. The performance page shows selected with the associated value. The descent profile remains unchanged. The speed target becomes blue on the speed scale, but the speed deviation range is not available. The aircraft may deviate from the descent profile, as the selected speed may differ from the FMS computed target speed, and speed deviation range does not apply. Constraints management. The compliance with constraints can be monitored on the navigation display and the flight plan page. The principle is the same as described in FMS climb section. Here, displays show that all constraints are predicted to be satisfied. Here is a test for your memory. What does this amber circle around the waypoint show? An amber circle is displayed around the waypoint if the altitude constraint is predicted to be missed by more than 250 feet. The blue level off arrow shows where the aircraft reaches FCU selected altitude. On the MCDU, the magenta star with the predicted altitude changes color to amber. The vertical revision page shows altitude error at the waypoint. If a speed constraint is predicted to be missed by more than 10 knots, select an appropriate speed. Resume managed speed when the aircraft is back on the descent profile. Within 150 nautical miles of the destination, if an excessive vertical constraint between two waypoints is detected, in the computed profile MCDU shows too steep path ahead scratchpad message. On the flight plan page, too steep path shows the corresponding leg. If required, extend the speed brakes before the more drag message is displayed. You should consider using a holding pattern if necessary. Selected descent. There are two modes for flying a selected descent: open descent and vertical speed, which are used for pilot tactical interventions. altitude constraints are ignored in these modes. Altitude and speed predictions displayed on the flight plan page assume an immediate return to managed descent mode. Selected descent with nav mode. When descending in open descent or vertical speed mode with the nav mode engaged, vertical deviation is displayed on the primary flight display and on the MCDU progress page. On navigation display, a white circle appears around the waypoint with an altitude constraint to indicate that the constraint is disregarded. Speed constraints are considered if the managed speed is active. Selected descent with heading or track mode. When flying in heading or track mode, only selected modes, except expedite descent, are available for descent. Vertical deviation is still displayed on the primary flight display, which provides a valuable tool for monitoring the descent, as long as cross-track error is less than 5 nautical miles. Vertical position may also be assessed on the navigation display, using the energy circle, which is indicated as a green arc. Early descent. An early descent is a descent started before the top of the descent point. You can initiate an early descent when the aircraft is within 200 nautical miles of the top of descent. In this example, the ATC asks you to initiate an early descent to flight level 150. Set the clearance altitude and then push the altitude selector on the FCU. FMA announces Mach in the first column and descent in the second column. On airspeed scale, target speed drops slowly to lower limit of the managed speed range. The aircraft starts to descend at a rate of 1,000 feet per minute. The vertical deviation symbol moves up on the altitude scale. On the MCDU, progress page shows the vertical deviation from the computed profile. On the navigation display, the broken blue arrow shows the intercept point, where the FMS profile will be captured. The FMS transitions to the computed descent path once it is captured. Late descent. If the descent cannot be assured at the top of descent, a decelerate message appears in white on the primary flight display and in amber on MCDU. The progress page shows the deviation from the computed profile, so it can be monitored. You should reduce the speed towards green dot. When cleared to descent, push the altitude selector to engage descent mode with the managed speed active. On the navigation display, the white broken arrow shows the intercept point where the FMS profile will be captured. Whenever the intercept point is predicted to be close to the constrained waypoint, the MCDU and primary flight display shows a more drag message. Use speed brakes as required to capture the path. Expedite descent. If a high rate of descent is required, you can use expedite descent mode. To initiate an expedite descent, push the expedite button on the FCU. The aircraft pitches to acquire and maintain a target speed of Mach 0.8 or 340 knots, whichever is lower. The FMA enunciates thrust idle and expedite descent. Push the FCU Alt knob to return to normal descent, or select another appropriate vertical mode.